The Last of Us Season 2 is out in full on HBO. This is the continuation of the hit adaptation of a post-apocalyptic video game. Stars Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. The first season covered the first game, and it was confirmed that the second game, and then so far the last one, would be spread across 3 more seasons, totaling 4. This season has only been 7 episodes in total and has been criticized pretty widely for various reasons. Now, my spoiler-free short version of the review is that it is a step down from the first one, primarily as a result of worse writing and also to some extent a shift in character focus, which means the show no longer relies on the amazing dynamic between Joel and Ellie. However, I'm far from the opinion that this is the worst thing ever and should be burnt on the stake and that Bella Ramsey needs to be harassed online. I think that the discourse nowadays has become very polarized and everything has to be either the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. I'd say this season is firmly in between. It's fine. I still liked it more than I didn't, and despite its flaws, and I hope that it can bounce back to the former quality in the next seasons. Now, from this point onwards, there might be spoilers, so if you want to avoid them, turn this off. And this season had a sort of massive event happening at the end of episode 2, so if you're unaware or want to preserve the surprise, you should turn this off. Right, so I mentioned the writing and character dynamics as the 2 main faults of the second season, and in terms of the writing, this mostly has to do with how Ellie is written. In the first season, she was an annoying, snarky brat, but she was 14 years old, so not only was it not a problem, I thought it was very fitting. But now she's supposed to be 19, 5 years have passed, and she's still immature, incompetent, plain stupid, doesn't act anything like you'd expect her to in these life-threatening situations. And again, she's supposed to have 5 additional years of upbringing and training from Joel and others at Jackson at this point in time. She is insufferable as the main character, and I haven't played the games, but from what I gather, she was written differently in there, with more edge and violence and seriousness. So I'm not a big fan of how it's handled in the show, and it's a problem when she's essentially becoming the sole protagonist starting from episode 2. Because the second reason, her attitude was acceptable in the first season was she was balanced by Joel constantly, and now his absence leaves a hole that sadly is not filled very well by other characters, as much as I think they are better written and more enjoyable than Ellie. It's especially evident in episode 6, which is a which is a flashback episode, and we get to see how well Joel and Ellie work on screen together. So it is an aspect that is sorely missing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing the decision to kill off Joel. I think it's a very powerful, bold, shocking moment, and it's just that it's just the thing that the show doesn't have a good way to execute what follows. And final point about Ellie herself. There's been a ton of backlash against Bella Ramsey. Now, look, I did find her character supremely annoying, and I do realize most of it is the writing and the direction, and even things like the hairstyle, which looks awful compared especially to the first season, and the flashbacks that we see now. Bella is definitely being set up to fail by other departments on the show. But, and I want to be sort of careful about this, as much as I don't like criticizing someone's appearance, I think that when you're an actor, appearance is part of your professional craft. And I would say Bella is badly cast in terms of looks for Ellie. I didn't mind her so much as teenage Ellie in season 1, but I do mind it as adult Ellie in season 2. She doesn't look like a hardened, revenge-driven young woman. She looks a bit still like a teenage potato, I'm very sorry to say, and I just find her to be irritating. I think she'd make a wonderful supporting character, but in the lead role you need someone magnetic, someone with charisma. And especially when you see her act against Isabella Merced as Dina, the contrast in charisma is just night and day. So I don't think that Bella deserves to be bombarded by nasty people on social media, not at all. But I do think it's okay to say that I think that she's not a good fit for the role anymore. I don't continue to buy her as a character. Moving on. The tone of the season is kind of all over the place, with the characters in Seattle especially acting like they're on this fun school trip instead of a dangerous war zone. There are some clunky dialogue scenes here and there with characters explaining aloud their feelings. The logistics are wacky with people teleporting all over the map. There are some clunky moments, like in the final episode, the whole sequence with Ellie being washed on the island for all of 3 minutes. It is just egregious in terms of how badly written it is and how little purpose it serves. Um, I think the season is also too short. With regards to Isaac, especially, it feels like we got introduced to him just enough to make me interested, and then just too little to make me, first of all, understand what he's doing, and then satisfied with what his purpose is within the story. Now, there are things I really enjoyed as well. I think that some of the cinematography and the sort of imagery is fantastic. The supporting performances are very good from everyone involved. You have Catherine O'Hara, Pedro Pascal shows up for a couple of episodes. I mentioned the Dina actress, Gabriel Luna. Episode 6 is generally just great as a whole, probably the strongest one the entire season. Episode 2 is great as a whole. I loved the Siege of Jackson. I loved the underground Cordyceps garage sequence at the end of episode 5. I like the mysterious conflict between the wolves and the Scars, which we don't really know anything about. I like Isaac, as I said, and as little as we've seen of Abby yet. I think that Caitlin Dever is a terrific actress, and I can't wait to see more of her. And finally, I'm sort of okay with the story not being finished at this point, because I understand that we'll be switching protagonists for the next season, and perhaps it was better to split at this point in time. However, I do think it would have made more sense if it was a mid-season break and we could get back to the story in a couple of weeks. But the reality is that they haven't even started writing the scripts for season 3, which means it's not going to come out until mid 2027 at the earliest, realistically, maybe even later. And that is just pure suffering to me. It kills all of my built-up hype and interest for a show. I know a lot of people have been ragging about this online recently, but the current TV schedules are just absolute dog shit. And when there's a 2-year break between the seasons, and the seasons are this short, it is just so difficult to remain excited. So to sum all of this up, it was a worse season than the first one. It has some very evident flaws, but overall I still think it was decent, and I have hope that it can become great once again. Perhaps weirdly, I place my hopes in Caitlin Dever as Abby in the next season, as I think she'll do a much better job as the lead than Bella Ramsey has done as Ellie. So yeah, let's just hope we don't forget everything that happened before the next season finally comes out.